They said the emperor's garden never knew decay. Every flower there bloomed out of season, fed by a secret only the executioners whispered about. Blood made the best soil. At dawn, the soldiers dragged her through the eastern gate, chains biting like frost. She did not resist. Her silence carried the weight of prophecy, and the air trembled as if afraid to touch her skin. The emperor watched from his jade throne, framed by banners that caught no wind. His face was carved calm, but the court could feel something move behind his eyes, a pulse of unease, a memory gnawing through years of order. They said she had cursed him, yet her eyes held nothing but sorrow for a man she once called divine. When the sentence was read, the clouds began to gather, not dark, but white, thick, blind, the kind of sky that forgets itself before it breaks. The high executioner hesitated. Her heartbeat echoed across the marble floor, slow, deliberate, unafraid. "Do it," the emperor whispered, but the words fell heavy like stones thrown into deep water. The blade rose. Time held its breath. She knelt, not as a criminal, but as someone returning to an altar that had waited too long. Her lips moved, one word, lost in thunder, and when steel met skin, something bloomed. Every day, another story rises from the ashes of forgotten empires, tales whispered in ruined temples, carried by wind and silence. You are standing at the edge of one now. If this story stirs something inside you, subscribe to Reimagined Orient. Every day, we awaken another legend long buried in the East, stories of beauty, betrayal, and the gods that never learned mercy. Leave a like to keep the lanterns burning, and tell us in the comments, from which city do you listen to the wind tonight? Now, let us return to the moment the sky lost its color. Chapter 1. The Flower Without a Season. The girl's name was Lin. Once the court called her the Emperor's Voice, for her songs could still the wind and coax cherry trees to bloom out of season. When she sang, the empire forgot its hunger. Now her voice was forbidden, sealed in silence. They said her throat carried treason, that she had sung the wrong prayer to the wrong god, one older than the throne itself. She had lived in the garden that circled the palace, tending to flowers that never died. The soil drank more than rain there. She had begun to notice how the blossoms grew redder after executions, how the roots reached toward the crimson puddles that followed. Still, she watered them, whispering the hymns her mother taught her, hymns that spoke to the sky, not the crown. The emperor loved her once, or so he claimed. He had found her singing beside a river, her voice rising like incense over water. He made her his concubine, his ornament, his angel of spring. But love in palaces is the kind that changes color under torchlight. When she refused to sing for war, the ministers called it blasphemy. When she refused to pray to the god of conquest, they called it sedition. The night before her trial, a storm tore through the capital. The Emperor Es' dream was of a field of lotus flowers blooming in blood, each petal a name he had ordered erased. He woke to the scent of rain and guilt. By dawn, he had forgotten both. When the guards came for her, Lin wore the same robe she had sung in, white silk that shimmered like a ghost refusing to fade. Her feet left no prints on the marble. The women of the court watched from behind fans, eyes sharp with envy and relief that it was not them. One whispered, "Even death will kneel before her." They took her through the eastern gate, where the executions pleased the sun first. The crowd gathered like storm clouds, merchants, monks, beggars, all drawn by rumor that the condemned girl would not bleed. A child in the front asked his mother why the wind smelled like flowers. The emperor arrived late. He sat upon his raised dais, his crown a cage of gold. His eyes searched for defiance, but Lin only bowed. The high executioner waited for the signal. The air was too still, too fragile. The crows on the temple roof had fled. When she knelt, her hair fell like spilled ink, pooling on the white stone. She whispered something, not to the emperor, but to the ground itself. Those closest heard it and wept without knowing why. It was a word that felt like forgiveness spoken in a dead language. The blade rose, The sky flickered white, as if the heavens had blinked. The emperor exhaled. Somewhere, a single lotus petal drifted across the floor. It should not have been there. Lotuses did not bloom in winter. When steel fell, the world went silent. Then, the first drop of blood touched stone and bloomed. Chapter 2. The bloom that ate the light. At first, no one moved. The blade stood buried in the altar, its edge humming like a trapped insect. The executioner stared at his own hands as if they had betrayed him. Around Lin's body, red spread, then slowed, then deepened to gold. From each drop of blood, something unfurled, a petal, soft as silk, luminous as dawn through mist. The courtiers gasped. The soldiers backed away, their armor whispering fear. The emperor did not rise. His fingers clenched the arms of his throne, veins pulsing blue beneath the lacquered calm. "It's a trick," he said, but his voice was small, and the sky above was turning paler, like paper losing its ink. The lotuses grew. They climbed the marble steps, opening their eyes of colorless light. The scent spread, heavy, impossible, intoxicating. The crows never returned. Clouds froze mid-drift. Time seemed to wait, confused. The petals touched the emperor's sandals. Where they touched, the gold dulled. "Burn them," someone whispered. "Burn everything." But no one moved. The executioner dropped to his knees, pressing his forehead to the ground. "Forgive me," he muttered, though no one had accused him. Lin's body was gone. Not vanished, transformed. The lotuses pulsed in rhythm, their glow steady, like breath. From their center came a sound faint as memory. Her voice, singing without lips, without lungs, without fear. It was not a song of mourning. It was a song of release, a hymn that remembered when the earth and sky spoke the same language. The emperor stood at last. His eyes reflected the petals, two small suns drowning in a field of white. "Stop this," he said. "You are dead." The song grew louder. The palace trembled. The banners on the walls curled inward, words burned off by invisible flame. The courtiers screamed, but their voices melted into the music until it was impossible to tell where prayer ended and terror began. Then the light rose. It gathered around the throne, spiraling upward in soft spirals, touching the ceiling. And the ceiling began to bloom. From its painted heavens, cracks opened, leaking radiance. The entire hall filled with the scent of lotus and thunder. The emperor stumbled backward. "Enough!" His crown fell, ringing against stone. The lotuses dimmed, just slightly as if listening. He sank to his knees, eyes wide. "Please," he whispered, "tell me what you want." The song softened. From the golden petals nearest him, a shape began to form. Not Lin as she had been, but Lin as light remembered her, robed in brightness, eyes dark with sorrow, a halo of mist around her face. "I wanted nothing," she said, and the words were made of air and grief. "You wanted everything." The emperor reached out. His hand passed through her glow. It came away wet with tears that were not his. She leaned forward, almost touching him, and the light dimmed again. "Your garden will never bloom," she said, "but the sky will never forget." Then she was gone. A soft wind, a scatter of petals, a silence that rang like music left unfinished. The courtiers fled. The executioner broke his blade. The priests fell prostrate, whispering new prayers for gods that had not yet been born. Only the emperor remained, kneeling amid the flowers. Above him, the heavens had turned white, colorless, endless, and unbearably still. He looked up and realized he had created a world where even the sky was ashamed to look down. Chapter 3. The White Sky. For 3 days, the sun did not rise. Dawn came pale and silent. The world washed into shades of bone. The sky held no color, no warmth, only the dull shimmer of perpetual mourning. The people called it the Emperor's Silence. Birds circled and vanished into the blankness as if flying into memory itself. Within the palace, servants walked barefoot, afraid their steps might echo. The flowers still covered the courtyard, but they did not wilt. They glowed faintly at night, breathing light like sleeping lungs. Some swore they heard them sing, not melodies, but heartbeats. The emperor sealed himself inside the hall of petals. He refused food. He spoke to no one but the dead. The ministers whispered through the corridors, debating if madness was contagious. They burned incense against curses, but the smoke clung to the ceilings and refused to leave, as though the gods themselves had settled in to watch. Each night, he dreamed the same dream. Lynn standing in the garden, her robe white against red blossoms. She never spoke. She only turned her face to the sky and smiled, as if daring heaven to forget again. When he woke, his hands were stained with pollen, golden, fragrant, real. On the fourth day, a messenger arrived from the southern provinces. His face was ashen, his voice shaking. "The rivers," he said, "they bloom." The emperor dismissed him, but when the man persisted, he was brought to the courtyard. There, in the reflection of a lotus petal, he saw the truth. Along every waterway in the empire, lotuses had begun to rise, from wells, from ponds, from the mouths of the dying. The priests called it blasphemy. The poets called it mercy. The people called it Lin's return. Every petal that opened was said to whisper her name. The emperor ordered the blooms cut. Soldiers with torches and blades rode from province to province, burning the rivers. Yet when the flames died, new flowers rose from the ashes. The petals were whiter than before, almost translucent, like ghosts learning to breathe. He summoned the oldest oracle from the mountains, a woman whose eyes were milk white and whose hands never stopped trembling. She came barefoot through the palace gates, leaving prints of light on the stone. When the emperor demanded an explanation, she only bowed and said, "What you killed refused to die. The sky took her instead. Now it forgets you." He struck her across the face, but her expression did not change. She turned to leave, whispering, "You cannot command forgiveness." That night, the emperor stood before the mirror in his chamber. The reflection was wrong. His crown was gone, his robe faded, his skin too pale. Behind him, the reflection of the garden was no longer a garden at all, only a vast plain of white petals stretching beyond sight. He turned, but the room behind him was empty. For the first time in his reign, he felt afraid of what waited beyond his own reflection. The next morning, the priests found the mirror cracked from corner to corner, and in its fractures bloomed 1,000 tiny lotuses. Chapter 4. The Road of Blossoms. The emperor left the palace at dusk without guards or fanfare. He wore a plain robe of ash-gray silk and carried no weapon but the weight of his own name. Behind him, the capital faded beneath a veil of colorless sky. Ahead, the road waited, a path lined with petals that no wind could move. He walked for days without sleep. Villages bowed as he passed, not in reverence, but in silence. Children left bowls of water on their doorsteps. Old women muttered prayers that the sky might remember blue again. Wherever he went, the rivers glimmered faintly, as though the world breathed through water. By the 7th day, his sandals were stained gold. The lotuses grew thicker here, not just in ponds or streams, but along the road itself, bursting through stone. The blossoms opened when he neared, then closed behind him, as if sealing him inside his own passage. At the border of the empire, he reached a shrine older than memory. Its roof caved in, its statues eroded to faceless guardians. Smoke from distant fires hung like ghosts between the trees. The emperor climbed the steps alone. When he entered, the scent of lotus was already there, sweet and unbearable. He knelt before the altar, where only cracked bowls and forgotten incense remained. His voice, when it came, was softer than a whisper. "If this is punishment," he said, "let it end. If this is mercy, let me understand it." The air thickened. The petals around him shifted, forming patterns that seemed almost deliberate. Spirals, rivers, constellations. A faint voice emerged, not from the heavens, but from beneath the earth. You killed what you loved, it said, and loved what you killed. The sky learned that trick from you. He bowed his head until his crownless forehead touched the floor. Lin, he murmured, though he knew the name carried no power now. I would trade 1,000 suns for one moment of your voice. Silence answered. Then, from the shadows behind the altar, something moved. Not quite light, not quite form. It stepped forward like a memory taking shape. Her, or the idea of her. The figure was made of drifting petals, each one glowing faintly, her face composed and dissolving at once. Why did you come? She asked, her voice echoing through the bones of the shrine. To give back what I stole. Her eyes, if they could be called that, lingered on him. You cannot return what never belonged to you. She reached out. Her hand hovered inches from his chest, the air between them trembling. You made a god out of fear. Now fear must finish what you began. The Emperor swallowed. Then take me. The figure smiled, sad, almost kind. The gods do not take, they reflect. She lowered her hand, and the light spread through the floor like veins of gold through marble. Outside, the river roared, though no wind stirred it. The petals in the shrine rose in slow spirals, encircling the Emperor. They brushed his face, his lips, his eyes. Where they touched, his flesh turned pale, not lifeless, but empty of all color. He felt his heartbeat slow until it matched the rhythm of the river below. When the light dimmed, he was gone. Only his robe remained, folded neatly on the steps, covered in dust and gold. The villagers who came later found the shrine blooming from within. Its roof had turned to glass. Its walls were white. And in the reflection of the water nearby, a figure walked endlessly, a man and a woman, forever kneeling before one another, forever unfinished. Chapter 5. The Kingdom Without a Shadow. Years passed, though no one could say how many. The empire endured, but not as it had been. Maps still marked its borders, yet no messenger who left returned, and no army dared march beneath a sky that refused to turn blue. The sun rose white and fell silver. Even fire burned pale. Children grew up thinking color was a rumor from another age. The courtiers who survived the Lotus Night ruled in silence. They decreed that no one should speak the emperor's name, nor the name of the woman who had once sung. But silence is a poor wall. It lets echoes through. In the markets, in temples, in lullabies whispered over sleepless children, the story lived. She knelt, and heaven blinked. In time, the empire began to worship her without admitting it. Shrines rose where lotuses bloomed. Priests burned white candles to honor the spirit of dawn. Her face appeared in clouds and water, sometimes smiling, sometimes turned away. People prayed to her for forgiveness, but what they sought most was her attention. The rivers carried petals every spring, though no one could find their source. Scholars debated whether it was divine mercy or the punishment of the gods. The monks said both could be true. In the capital, the great garden remained sealed, guarded by soldiers who feared their own reflection. At night, they swore they heard footsteps among the flowers. Then one morning, the sealed gates stood open. No one saw who had unbarred them. Inside, the garden had changed. The marble paths were gone, the ponds dry, the trees bare. In their place, an ocean of white lotus swayed soundlessly. At its center lay the emperor's crown, half buried in the petals. No body, no bones, only a shimmer where the air refused to settle. The high priest declared it a miracle. The poets called it justice. The people called it peace. And yet, when the wind passed over the garden, it carried a hum too low to be song, too sad to be silence. Some said it was her voice returning. Others said it was his. Seasons came and went without color. The sky remained pale. The empire learned to live beneath it. Children drew white suns in the dust and asked why light had no hue. The elders told them, once, the sky loved a voice so much it forgot itself. Far beyond the capital, pilgrims followed the rivers to where they began, a mountain drowned in mist. There they built a temple of glass to catch the reflection of the heavens. They named it the Shrine of the Colorless Dawn, and every year, on the day the flowers bloom brightest, they leave bowls of water at their doors so the sky may see what it lost. Some nights, travelers on the southern roads claim to see two figures in the fog. A woman in white, a man in gray, walking side by side but never touching. When lightning flashes, they kneel. And for a moment, the world seems painted again, but only for a moment. Closing. The sky that forgot itself. They say the empire still stands somewhere beyond the horizon, hidden beneath a sky too pale for gods to notice. Its people no longer name their rulers, they name their rivers instead. They believe that as long as water moves, memory will not harden into stone. When the wind passes through the fields of lotus, it carries no color, no sound, only a trembling, like the breath before a song. Some claim to hear her voice there, others his, but the truth does not matter. What matters is that the story keeps walking barefoot, across generations that no longer remember why the sky turned white. If you listen closely tonight, you might hear it too, the hush between thunder and forgiveness. That is where the East keeps its ghosts. And perhaps if you are quiet enough, one of them will whisper back.